stood in the back of the boardroom watching my manager present my project to the investors. Every slide, every chart, every strategic recommendation. I had created them during 6 months of late nights and weekends. But Marcus Bennett referred to everything as my vision and my analysis. The investors nodded approvingly. Marcus answered questions using my exact words, never mentioning my name. My colleague Sophia glanced at me, her expression sympathetic. I kept my face neutral, professional. Inside something was breaking. When the presentation ended, the lead investor shook Marcus's hand. This is exactly what we needed. The funding is approved. $8.5 million for implementation. The room erupted in applause. I clapped along, stomach churning. After the investors left, Marcus gathered the team. Great work, everyone. Huge win for the department. He still didn't mention me. Not once. That afternoon, an email arrived from HR. Isabella, we need to schedule a private discussion about your role in the recent funding project. Please confirm your availability. I stared at the message, pulse quickening. Something was very wrong. The HR meeting was scheduled for the next morning. I arrived early, documentation folder in hand. Marcus sat beside Valerie from HR, looking composed. I took the seat across from them. Isabella, thank you for coming, Valerie began. We wanted to discuss your contributions to the funding project. Relief washed over me. Finally, recognition. Then Marcus spoke. I've been reviewing the timeline. I wanted to address concerns about delays in the initial research phase. I blinked. Delays. Yes. The first 3 weeks fell behind schedule, creating complications. I had to personally intervene to get us back on track. That wasn't true. I had the emails to prove it. Valerie made notes. Isabella, can you speak to the delays? There were no delays. Every milestone was met on schedule. I'm sure you did your best, Marcus interrupted smoothly. But the reality is, the project required significant oversight. We need to be honest about what happened. Valerie's pen moved across her notepad. My throat tightened. Given these concerns, Valerie said slowly, we may need to reassess your position on future projects. My job was at risk because of his lies. I drove home gripping the steering wheel hard. The anger was there, hot and sharp, but underneath was something colder, something calculating. I wouldn't scream or cry. I wouldn't confront him publicly. I would be strategic. At home, I opened my laptop and started organizing evidence. Every email, every draft, every piece proving my work. The first document was my original proposal, dated 6 months ago. My analysis. Marcus had approved it with one line. Looks good. Proceed. Next came weekly status reports showing green lights on every milestone. No delays. No issues. Just progress. Then something caught my attention in the funding contract. A clause about intellectual property rights and authorship. I leaned closer, reading carefully. Section 7.3. All intellectual property and project authorship rights shall be retained by the documented originator of the work product. Marcus had signed this contract without reading it carefully. He had claimed authorship in front of investors. A slow smile spread across my face. Over 3 days I became meticulous. I pulled every version of every document, noting timestamps and edit histories. Version 1 of the Strategic Framework. Created by Isabella Torres, March 15th. Version 2. Edited by Isabella Torres, March 22nd. Final presentation. Created by Isabella Torres, June 8th. Last edited by Marcus Bennett, June 12th. Minor formatting only. He had barely touched it. Just added his name to the title slide. I downloaded everything to an external drive, then created backup copies in my cloud storage. While searching the shared drive, I noticed a folder I'd never seen. Embed 5. It showed as restricted, but the name appeared in the directory. I checked the properties. Someone had accidentally granted my user group red access 2 weeks ago. My heart raced. Clicked it. The folder opened. Inside were meeting recordings and draft notes dated before Marcus's presentation. I opened the first recording and hit play. The recording was from 3 weeks ago. I heard my voice explaining the strategic framework, walking through financial projections, answering questions. Marcus's voice appeared twice. Good, and let's move forward. I opened another file, notes from April showing my detailed analysis. Every key point Marcus had presented was there, documented in my handwriting from the whiteboard session. This was irrefutable proof the ideas predated his presentation by months. I was focused on the files when I heard footsteps. Working late again, Isabella? I jumped, closing the window instantly. Marcus stood 5 feet away, jacket over his arm, expression unreadable. Just finishing reports, I said steadily. He moved closer, scanning my screen. I'd closed the folder just in time. Only a spreadsheet showed. You seem very dedicated. But sometimes excessive curiosity about internal files can backfire. The threat was thinly veiled. I'm just doing my job. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Of course. Have a good evening. After he left, I sat motionless, hands shaking. He suspected something. I needed to be more careful. I worked from home the next day, citing a doctor's appointment. I needed distance while organizing evidence. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with an internal message. We should talk. Coffee tomorrow. Antonio Ruiz worked in analytics. We'd collaborated briefly but weren't close. I replied, sure. 9 a.m. at Groundwork. See you there. Next morning I arrived early. Antonio showed up looking nervous. Thanks for meeting me, he said. I wasn't sure if I should reach out, but I couldn't keep quiet. About what? About what Marcus did. I was in those planning meetings. I know whose ideas those were. When he presented them as his own, I was shocked. Relief flooded through me. I wasn't alone. Why didn't you say anything? Fear. Marcus has power. But I've seen him do this before. Someone needs to stop him. What do you know about the funding deal? He glanced around, then lowered his voice. More than I should. That deal isn't as solid as everyone thinks. Over the next week, I quietly reached out to 3 colleagues who had witnessed my work. I didn't reveal my plan, just asked casual questions about their recollections. Sophia from marketing remembered me presenting the consumer analysis in March. You spent weeks on that. I still have your email with the findings. Carlos from operations recalled the implementation roadmap. You sent me 5 versions, constantly refining it. I thought it was brilliant. Maya from finance confirmed my authorship of the projections. Those were solid. Very thorough. That was all you. I documented each conversation, building a network of witnesses. During lunch with Antonio, he dropped another bombshell. The funding deal has a review clause. If any material misrepresentations are discovered within 90 days, the investors can pull the funding. I set down my coffee. Misrepresentations. About project scope, authorship, team qualifications. Standard in these contracts. How do you know? He smiled slightly. I reviewed the contract for finance. Some interesting language. Section 7.3 particularly caught my attention. He knew. He knew about the authorship clause. That clause could blow up the entire deal. Yes, it could. That night, I pulled out the full funding contract and read it cover to cover. There it was, buried in the legal language. Section 7.3. Intellectual property and authorship. All intellectual property, strategic frameworks, and analytical work products developed for this project shall remain the property of the documented original creators. Authorship attribution must accurately reflect actual contribution. Material misrepresentation of authorship may constitute grounds for contract review or termination. And below that, even more interesting. Section 9.2. Compliance and accuracy. All parties represent and warrant that information provided to funding partners is accurate, complete, and free from material misrepresentation. Discovery of intentional misrepresentation may result in immediate funding suspension and repayment of advanced funds. Marcus had stood in front of investors and claimed authorship of work I had created. He had signed this contract, and he had no idea what he'd done. Triggering this clause would destroy the deal he'd just secured. It would humiliate him publicly. It would cost the company $8.5 million in funding. But it would also prove definitively that the work was mine. I sat back, weighing the consequences. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. About ensuring he couldn't do this to anyone else. I needed to be absolutely certain before I made any move. The next day, I scheduled a casual lunch with one of the company's legal advisors, Felix Ortega. We'd worked together on contract reviews before, and he trusted me. Felix, hypothetical question, I said over sandwiches. If someone misrepresents authorship on a project to secure funding, what happens? He raised an eyebrow. That's specific. Is this about something real? Just curious. I'm reviewing some of our internal processes. He considered it. Well, it depends on the contract language. But generally, if there's an authorship clause and someone lies about who did the work, it could trigger a compliance investigation. The company could face serious consequences. Loss of funding, reputation damage, potential legal action. What about the person who misrepresented the work? They'd likely face termination. Possibly worse, depending on the severity. I nodded slowly, processing this. And if someone wanted to challenge a misrepresentation, how would they do it? Felix studied me carefully. They'd need documented evidence. Emails, version histories, witness statements. The stronger the paper trail, the better. Why do you ask? Just making sure I understand our policies. He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. That afternoon, I received an email from Marcus. Isabella, I'd like to discuss your career path and some exciting opportunities. My office, 4 p.m. The timing was suspicious. But I couldn't refuse without raising red flags. I arrived at Marcus's office at exactly 4 p.m. He greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Isabella, come in. Close the door. I sat across from his desk, my phone in my pocket set to record. I'd learned from his late-night warning to always document our interactions. I wanted to talk about your future here, he began, leaning back in his chair. The funding we just secured opens up some interesting possibilities. Promotions, new projects, significant opportunities for people who are team players. That sounds good. It does. But I need to be honest with you, Isabella. There's been some concern about your attitude lately. Some people have noticed you seem distracted, unhappy even. I kept my expression neutral. I'm focused on doing good work. Of course. But perception matters. And right now, the perception is that you might not be the best fit for high-profile projects going forward. Unless, of course, you can demonstrate that you're fully committed to the team vision. The threat was clear. Fall in line or face consequences. I'm always committed to producing quality work, I said carefully. Good. Because I'd hate to see your career suffer due to misunderstandings. He paused, then added, by the way, I'll be leading the next phase of this project. I'll need your support, but in more of a supporting role. Administrative tasks, that kind of thing. He was sidelining me, taking my work and now diminishing my position. Smiled. I understand completely. After I left his office, I listened to the recording. Every word was captured clearly. Over the weekend, I reviewed every document again, looking for inconsistencies. I found something interesting in the investor presentation Marcus had delivered. On slide 14, he'd referenced a market growth rate of 23% annually. But my original analysis showed 19%. I had the data sources to prove it. On slide 22, he'd projected implementation costs of $2.1 million. My detailed cost analysis showed $2.4 million. He'd lowered the numbers to make the project look more attractive. These weren't just attribution issues. These were factual errors that could affect the investment decision. I documented each discrepancy carefully, noting where his numbers diverged from my original research. Then I received news that changed everything. The investors were conducting a routine compliance audit of all funding agreements. Standard procedure, apparently, for deals over $5 million. The audit would begin next week. Marcus didn't know it yet, but his misrepresentations were about to be examined by professionals whose job was to find exactly this kind of problem. I just needed to make sure the auditors found what they were looking for. On Monday morning, Marcus called an emergency team meeting. He looked stressed, which was unusual for him. "I need everyone's support over the next 2 weeks," he announced. "The investors are conducting a compliance audit. This is routine, nothing to worry about, but I need all project documentation organized and ready for review." He glanced at me. "Isabella, I'll need you to compile all the research files and supporting data. Everything organized by phase." "Of course," I said. This was perfect. He was asking me to organize the very evidence that would expose him. I spent the next 3 days meticulously preparing the documentation. But I didn't sanitize it. I included everything. Original drafts with my name, version histories showing my edits, emails demonstrating my authorship. I organized it exactly as he requested, chronologically by phase, making the progression of my work crystal clear. When Marcus reviewed the compiled files, he seemed satisfied. "Good work. This looks thorough." He hadn't actually read it carefully. If he had, he would have noticed that every document pointed back to me as the originator. Antonio stopped by my desk that afternoon. "The auditors are asking specifically about the strategic framework. They want to interview the person who created it." "Marcus, you mean?" "They asked for the technical lead on the analysis. I told them I'd check and get back to them." He smiled slightly. "They seemed very interested in speaking to whoever did the actual analytical work. I didn't directly tell Antonio to direct the auditors to me. But when he asked, 'Should I mention you did the core analysis?' I simply said, 'I think accuracy in these situations is important.'" Over the next few days, I began subtly correcting small factual errors in team discussions. When Marcus mentioned the 23% growth rate in a meeting, I politely noted, "Actually, our data showed 19%. I can send you the source files." When he referenced the $2.1 million implementation cost, I added, "The detailed breakdown I prepared showed $2.4 million. Should I update the records?" Each correction was minor, professional, backed by documentation. But they added up. Colleagues started noticing discrepancies between what Marcus said and what the actual research showed. "Is the presentation data accurate?" Sophia asked me privately after one meeting. "My original analysis was accurate," I said carefully. "I'm not sure where the other numbers came from." She frowned. "You should probably mention that to someone." "I'm documenting everything for the audit," I assured her. Marcus noticed the growing unease. I saw him pull Antonio aside one day, asking if anyone had been spreading concerns about the project data. Antonio shrugged. "People are just being thorough for the audit. You know how it is." But I could see Marcus was starting to worry. Marcus tried to regain control by launching a new project, something unrelated to the funded work. He made a big announcement about it in a department meeting, positioning himself as the visionary leader once again. "This is our next big initiative," he declared. "I've been developing the concept for weeks." I recognized the idea immediately. It was from a proposal I'd sent him 2 months ago that he'd dismissed as not ready yet. When he asked for volunteers to join the project team, I raised my hand. "I'd like to contribute," I said. "I actually have some preliminary research that might be useful." He couldn't refuse without looking petty. "Sure, Isabella. We'll discuss it." After the meeting, I made sure to send him an email referencing my original proposal from 2 months earlier, copying my timestamp and concept summary. Just a friendly reminder that I had documentation. That evening, I was working late when I found another email in the shared archive, One Marcus had sent to his own personal email account. The subject line: Next project, quick claim. The message body was brief: attaching Isabella's proposal for review. Will present as my concept next week. She won't remember sending it. He'd planned to steal my next project too. And he'd been careless enough to document his intention. I forwarded the email to my personal account and added it to my evidence folder. The compliance audit team arrived on Monday. 3 people from an independent firm, all business in their dark suits and serious expressions. They set up in a conference room and began reviewing documents. Marcus spent the first day with them, walking through the project timeline and his role. On Tuesday afternoon, one of the auditors called me directly. Ms. Torres, I'm Claire Wu from the compliance team. We have some questions about the strategic framework and financial analysis. Would you have time to speak with us? Of course. I met with them that afternoon. Claire and her colleague Thomas asked detailed questions about the methodology, the data sources, the analytical approach. I answered everything precisely, referencing specific sections of my research. I mentioned the original documents I'd created, the version histories, the timeline. These calculations are quite sophisticated, Claire noted. How long did this analysis take you? About 3 months, working evenings and weekends. Thomas reviewed his notes. Mr. Bennett indicated this took about 6 weeks of high-level strategic thinking. His description suggested a more conceptual approach rather than detailed analytical work. I can provide you with the original data models and calculations if that would help, I offered. That would be very helpful, Claire said, exchanging a glance with Thomas. After the meeting, Claire mentioned, we may have additional questions. Some of the numbers in the investor presentation don't match the documentation we've reviewed. I noticed some discrepancies too, I said carefully. I assumed there were updated figures I hadn't seen. We'll need to clarify that. I returned to my desk, my heart racing. The auditors had noticed the inconsistencies. Now they were asking questions. The audit continued throughout the week. The auditors interviewed Antonio, Sophia, and Carlos. They requested version histories and email threads. They compared the investor presentation to the original research files. Marcus grew visibly anxious. I saw him checking his phone constantly, pacing in the hallway, having whispered conversations with his own manager. On Thursday, he cornered me near the break room. What did you tell the auditors? He asked, his voice low and tense. I answered their questions about my work, I said calmly. Your work. This was a team effort, Isabella. I hope you made that clear. I explained my specific contributions. They seemed interested in the analytical methodology. His jaw tightened. We need to be on the same page here. If there are any inconsistencies in our stories, it could cause problems. I only told them the truth, I said. Is there a problem with that? He stared at me, then walked away without answering. That afternoon, Claire requested another meeting with me. This time, she asked about the discrepancies in the numbers. The presentation shows a 23% growth rate, but your analysis indicates 19%. Can you explain that? I pulled up my data sources. This is the market research I conducted. The 19% figure is based on 5 years of industry data from these 3 sources. I'm not sure where the 23% came from. It appears in Mr. Bennett's final presentation to investors. I didn't provide that number, I said carefully. Claire made notes. Thank you. This is helpful. By Friday, the atmosphere in the office was tense. The auditors had been interviewing people all week, and Marcus's stress was obvious to everyone. I knew I needed to accelerate my documentation. If Marcus realized how much evidence existed against him, he might try to delete files or pressure people into changing their stories. I spent the weekend creating a comprehensive timeline document that showed every stage of the project, every contribution, every piece of evidence. I included screenshots, email headers, file timestamps, and witness quotes. The document was 40 pages long. Undeniable. On Monday, I encrypted it and stored copies in 3 separate locations. I also sent a copy to my personal attorney with instructions to release it if anything happened to my employment. Tuesday morning, I found an email in my personal account, forwarded by Antonio. It was from Marcus to the department head, sent late Sunday night. Concerns about project attribution. Isabella has been making claims about her contributions that are exaggerated. May need to address her performance issues formally. He was trying to preemptively discredit me. But he'd made a mistake. The email timestamp showed he'd sent it after the auditors had already flagged discrepancies in his presentation. It looked reactive and defensive. I forwarded it to my evidence folder and waited. I started dropping subtle hints in conversations with Marcus, watching his reactions. "I'm sure the audit will confirm everything was done properly," I mentioned in passing. He nodded stiffly. "It's so important to have accurate records," I added. "Especially for investor relationships." His eye twitched slightly. "I was reviewing the contract language last night. Some interesting clauses about authorship and compliance. Very thorough." He looked at me sharply. "Why were you reviewing the contract?" "Just being prepared in case the auditors have questions. I want to make sure I understand our obligations." He walked away, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Over the next few days, he started making mistakes in meetings. He confused data points, contradicted himself, forgot which numbers he'd presented to investors. Colleagues noticed. I heard Sophia whispering to Carlos, "Is Marcus okay? He seems off." The pressure was getting to him, and I was the one applying it, one careful comment at a time. The following week, there was a routine department meeting that turned out to be anything but routine. The division VP, Helena Vargas, attended, unusual for these sessions. During the update section, she asked about the funded project. Marcus stood to present, but Helena interrupted. "Actually, I'd like to hear from the technical lead on the analysis. Isabella, could you walk us through the methodology?" Marcus's face went pale. I stood calmly and walked through my analytical framework, the data sources, the modeling approach. Helena asked specific questions. I answered each one precisely, referencing the work I'd done. When I finished, Helena nodded. "Excellent work. This is exactly the kind of rigorous analysis we need." The room was silent. Several executives were present. They'd all just heard me speak authoritatively about work Marcus had claimed as his own. After the meeting, Marcus was barely contained. But he couldn't confront me publicly without making it worse. I received a message from Claire that afternoon. "Investor audit team would like to speak with you directly. They have questions about the financial projections. Can you meet with them tomorrow?" The investors themselves wanted to talk to me. Marcus's world was beginning to crumble, and he knew it. The pressure on Marcus intensified. The auditors requested additional documentation, specifically, early drafts and working files that would show the evolution of the analysis. Marcus tried to control the process. I overheard him telling his assistant to organize the files before sending them to the auditors. But I had already provided the compliance team with my complete version history. They had the real progression of the work. When the auditors compared what Marcus provided versus what I'd given them, the discrepancies would be obvious. That afternoon, I received a meeting invitation from the compliance team. Project review interview, Isabella Torres and Marcus Bennett, Thursday 2 p.m. We would be questioned together in the same room. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I reviewed every document, every timestamp, every piece of evidence. I rehearsed my answers, keeping them factual and calm. Wednesday evening, Marcus sent me an email. "We should align our stories before tomorrow's meeting. Inconsistencies could create problems." I didn't respond. Thursday arrived. I dressed professionally and arrived at the conference room early. Marcus was already there, looking exhausted. The auditors, Claire, Thomas, and a third person I hadn't met, sat across from us. "Thank you both for meeting with us," Claire began. "We have some questions about the project timeline and contributions." This was it. The moment of truth. Claire started with general questions about the project's scope and timeline. Marcus answered first, describing it as a collaborative effort with his strategic oversight. Then she asked, "Mr. Bennett, can you walk us through how you developed the core analytical framework?" He described it in general terms: strategic thinking, market insights, innovative approach. "Can you be more specific about the methodology?" Thomas pressed. Marcus stumbled. "Well, it involved various analytical techniques, market research, financial modeling." "Who performed the actual modeling work?" "The team worked on it collectively." Claire turned to me. "Ms. Torres, can you describe your role in the analytical framework?" Pulled out my laptop. "I created the framework in March. I can show you the original files." I displayed the first version, created March 15th, with my name in the file properties. Then version 2, dated March 22nd. Then the final analysis from May. "Every version was created and edited by me," I explained. "The methodology involved regression analysis, market segmentation modeling, and competitive positioning frameworks." I walked through the technical details. Claire and Thomas followed along, asking questions that I answered precisely. Marcus sat silent, his face growing redder. "Mr. Bennett," Claire said, "the investor presentation shows a 23% market growth rate. Ms. Torres's analysis shows 19%. Can you explain the discrepancy?" "I must have updated the figures based on new data." "We've reviewed all the data files," Thomas interrupted. "There's no source for the 23% figure." The room fell silent. Claire pulled out another document. "We also found significant differences in the cost projections and several other data points." Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. The auditors had him. And they knew it. "Mr. Bennett, we've reviewed the file creation logs, edit histories, and email communications," Claire continued, her tone professional but firm. "The documentary evidence indicates that Ms. Torres created the analytical framework, conducted the research, and drafted the investor materials. Your contributions appear limited to approval and formatting." Marcus's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "The documentation doesn't tell the whole story. I provided strategic guidance. The contract language in Section 7.3 is quite specific about authorship attribution," Thomas said. "It requires accurate representation of who created the intellectual property. The investors were told you developed this framework. I oversaw the project. That's different from creating it." Claire's words were precise. "Mr. Bennett, did you personally create the analytical models and research that formed the basis of the investor presentation?" The silence stretched out. Everyone knew the answer. "I provided strategic direction," he finally said. "That's not what you told the investors." Claire slid a transcript across the table. "This is from the funding presentation. You said, and I quote, 'I developed this framework over several months of intensive analysis.' That's a direct claim of authorship." Marcus's face was ashen now. He looked at me, perhaps hoping for some lifeline, but I kept my expression neutral. "The discrepancies in the data are also concerning," Thomas added. "The investors made funding decisions based on growth rates and cost projections that don't match the actual research." Marcus stood abruptly. "I need to speak with my supervisor." "Please sit down," Claire said calmly. "We're not finished." He sat. The auditors exchanged glances. Then Claire spoke the words that would change everything. "We'll be recommending a full compliance investigation." The next 48 hours moved quickly. The compliance team delivered their preliminary findings to senior leadership. The discrepancies were too significant to ignore. Helena Vargas called an emergency meeting with Marcus, the legal team, and department heads. I wasn't invited, but Antonio heard about it and sent me updates. "They're going through everything," he texted. "The investors are on a conference call. Not happy." Later that day, Helena requested to meet with me privately. "Isabella, I need to understand exactly what happened here," she said, her expression serious. I walked her through everything. The original work, the timeline, the evidence. I showed her the documents, the emails, the version histories. When I finished, she sat back. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I needed to be absolutely certain. And I needed the evidence to be undeniable. She nodded slowly. The investors are threatening to suspend the funding pending a complete review. They feel misled about the project's foundation and leadership. I'm sorry the company is facing this. You shouldn't apologize. Marcus created this situation. Pause. They want to speak with you directly. They want to understand the actual provenance of the work. The next day, I had a video call with the lead investor and two of his partners. I presented the same evidence I'd shown the auditors. This is your work? The lead investor asked. Yes, sir. All of it. And Mr. Bennett claimed he created it. Yes, sir. He conferred quietly with his partners, then turned back to the camera. We're going to need time to reconsider this investment. But Ms. Torres, I want you to know, if we do move forward, we'll want to work directly with the person who actually understands this analysis. Marcus was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The announcement went out Friday afternoon, carefully worded but clear enough that everyone understood. The division VP scheduled a meeting with me Monday morning. The company has a difficult decision to make, Helena said. The investors are considering pulling the funding. The misrepresentation is serious. My heart sank. I never wanted to destroy the deal. Let me finish. She held up a hand. They're considering pulling the funding from Marcus. They want the project to continue, but they want you as the technical lead. They want your name on the contract as the project originator, as it should have been from the start. I stared at her. They want me to lead it. Formally. Officially. With full credit and authority. She slid a document across her desk. This is an amended contract. Your name replaces Marcus's as the principal investigator. The funding will be released once you sign. I read through it carefully. Everything was there. Proper attribution, intellectual property rights, project leadership. We're also offering you a promotion, Helena continued. Senior Project Director. Significant raise. Your choice of team members. Over the next week, everything shifted. My allies, Antonio, Sofia, Carlos, were publicly recognized for their support. The department rallied around the corrected project structure. Marcus's reputation was in ruins. Word spread through the industry. His career, built on taking credit for others' work, was over. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Justice had been served through facts, evidence, and patience. 3 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where Marcus had presented my work as his own. But this time my name was on every slide. The investors sat in the same seats, but now they directed their questions to me. I answered each one with confidence, backed by months of deep understanding of the work. When the presentation ended, the lead investor stood and shook my hand. This is exceptional work, Ms. Torres. We're excited to move forward with you leading this initiative. The funding was fully released. The project was officially mine. Helena pulled me aside afterward. You handled this with remarkable professionalism. Most people would have lost their temper or given up. You stayed strategic. I learned that competence and documentation are more powerful than confrontation, I replied. A valuable lesson. She smiled. We're watching your career with great interest. As I walked back to my office, my new larger office, I passed the desk where I'd sat for 3 years, working late nights on analysis that others took credit for. That version of me felt like a lifetime ago. I had learned that patience, preparation, and proof were more powerful than any public confrontation. That strategic silence could be louder than angry accusations. That systems of accountability work when you know how to use them. Marcus had tried to steal my work and my future. Instead, he'd given me something valuable. The knowledge that I could stand up for myself, fight back intelligently, and win. The contract clause he'd missed didn't just save my project. It taught me that details matter, documentation matters, and knowing your rights matters. I was untouchable now. not because I was protected by anyone but because I had proven I could protect myself. And that was the most empowering victory of all.